All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Michael Kaye from the Center for Functional Health, and I have the honor of speaking with Dr. Carolyn Trasko. We're going to cover a lot of great topics tonight. We're going to be talking about the mind, body, spirit. We're going to talk about integrative mental health. So, Dr. Trasko, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming on to the show. And I can't wait to talk with you and ask you a bunch of questions. I took a lot of great notes. Um, so let's start from how did you get here, right? Like, what were you doing and
Sure.
how did you get here?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for even inviting me on this broadcast because I am thrilled and honored to be here. I say to people, part of how I got here is I feel like I'm a woman on a mission to share information about integrative mental health because an awful lot of people wonder, what is that? And I say to people, well, if you understand a little bit about functional medicine and a little bit of integrative medicine, the way I explain it is that integrative mental health is kind of the youngest sibling
Okay.
within that model of medicine, right? It's the newest one. And my own journey, so I have been in the behavioral health and addiction field for 35 years. And always been this super, super curious person, and I still am. And I feel blessed to be able to do what I do, even though this isn't an easy journey. I never knew that part of the path would be serving as such a pioneer. But when I first started in the field, I worked with adults who had chronic, what we called in those days, chronic mental illness. And I learned so much from them. I learned about their level of resilience. And my curious self kept saying, wait, there seems like there's more to this than what back then, 35 years ago, talk about lack of integration. Mental health and addiction were completely separate. In fact, we treated the same clients or patients, but we didn't talk to one another. Our models weren't at all integrated, unfortunately. And so that kind of led me down this path of saying, hang on, I'm starting to see patterns here. What about the addictions that seem to correlate with these really chronic mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, et cetera. And as I traveled along the path, my first calling, I always say to people, was to be a psychotherapist, to really help people on that brain level, on that talk therapy relationship level. And that thankfully wasn't where my journey ended. I remember sitting in an international trauma conference in Boston, and it was put on by Dr. Kolk, who a lot of people that are familiar with trauma know he's really the guru around helping us to think outside of the box with treating trauma. And I've had the blessing of being trained by him directly, but then also taking part in these international conferences for about 10 years in a row. And I'm sitting in one of the workshops, and I want to say maybe back all the way in 2009. It was a long time ago. And I remember hearing these presenters talk about something I had never heard of before. They were talking about polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve. And I remember calling my friend on the break and saying, I need you to remember this moment because it felt deeply like something big was happening that my conscious mind did not understand. And I said, I need you to just I've just heard something that I feel is the answer, and I don't even know the question. And so fast forward, I've had the opportunity to be trained directly by the creator of polyvagal theory, Dr. Porges, and I've taken in addition, I've also received my doctorate in mind body medicine. So I have like taken all of these wonderful, beautiful pieces of what I call Western medicine and these absolutely astounding ancient practices from other world medicine, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, energy medicine, including Native American tribal medicine, and I've woven them together in what I call, so my version, my model of integrative mental health is truly mind, body, brain, and spirit. And that means when I'm working with a client, I am trying to do my best to live this medicine that I practice with
Hmm.
people and that I promote. So I'm trying to be present on all of those levels within myself with any given client that is working with me. And regardless of the reason why someone comes to me. So obviously some people may come to me because they're experiencing anxiety, depression. I try to help them to understand that your body is an important area, it's an important source of deep wisdom. And obviously in traditional psychology, traditional psychiatry, right?
Hmm.
There's been that split where we don't necessarily learn about the body. Even when I got trained in clinical work 35 years ago, and I was doing trauma work, they didn't teach us that we needed to focus on the body. And so it was all my own curiosity saying, hang on, there must be a better way. There has to be a better way. And so I'm always searching for more effective ways to help people to heal from what I say, whatever ails them. And
Hmm.
I've had the blessing of working with people even if their earlier traumas in their life might have happened 60 plus years ago. It's really never too late if they have this opening, this awareness, this opportunity to really have a better mind, body, brain, spirit alignment.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So before we unpack those different type of presentations and ways they can help an individual
Hmm.
and circle our way back to trauma, there's traditional Chinese medicine, there's the Ayurvedic, there's the integrative functional. So we have these different types of approaches, and you talked about like Indian approach,
Hmm.
almost like a type of natural approach, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So with having all that in your armament, like what do you choose? So can you give us a difference, like what is this thought process? What is this thought process? What is this thought process? I mean, I know they all relate,
They
but
do.
what are the differences? Why would you choose
So
one versus the other?
in a lot of ways, it's based on what is the client's awareness and their comfort zone. So clearly, as we know about integrative and functional medicine, a big piece of the medicine is understandably education. And so many people are not familiar with, for instance, Ayurvedic medicine, which is East Indian medicine. Now, some people are familiar with yoga, which is a branch of Ayurvedic medicine. But what I deeply love, I guess I see more the similarities between all of these medicines. And the way I see the similarity as the practitioner is I am aware that other world medicines like TCM, Ayurveda, Native American medicine, or tribal medicine, they never separated out mind, body, spirit in their medicine model like we did here in Western medicine. And I say to people, I am truly an integrative practitioner. So that means I try to cull the best of Western medicine. And that includes, like, I'm not against prescribed medications for my clients, but I am sharing with them, we're aware there are no magic pill, right? There
Mhm.
is just not a magic pill that's going to cure all your symptoms. So we need to do more work than that. And when a person comes to see me, I give them a little bit of like some information. Like I say to them, have you ever heard, I ask them questions, have you ever heard of TCM? And some people have, right? They've learned, wait, I know acupuncture and I know acupressure, for instance, but they might not recognize that part of the basis of TCM really looks at even our physical symptoms of illness, as well as, like, we call dis-ease or
Mhm.
disease, as being related to and connected to being out of harmony and balance in all of the organ systems. And Ayurvedic medicine is very similar. They've also never separated out mind, body, and spirit. And in Ayurvedic medicine, they go deeper and they call it the chakra system. So, those energy spinning circles of energy and light that literally encompass from around the area of our body, of our thighs, all the way up through the top of our head. And in Ayurvedic medicine, they feel that our mental health issues, as well as our physical conditions and disease, are also due to disharmony, imbalance, and more specifically, energetic blockages that end up, if you think about energy, can become a mass, like even a tumor. So when I'm sharing some of this information with clients, I look at where are they at in their journey. And I always say this to prospective clients. What I'm sharing with people, including tonight with you and the audience, are just suggestions. They're offerings. They're not actual prescriptions, because we have to have the opportunity. right? I call my programs empowered wellness because knowledge is power, but you get to choose what fits best for me, and for some people they'll say to me, some of that other stuff sounds a little weird, it sounds woo woo, I'm uncomfortable with it. And because I'm at the same time teaching them about the neurobiology of their survival brain, so fight, flight, freeze, and submit, I'm saying to them, can you just check in with your body when you're hearing me say some of these things? Because if there's any part of your body that maybe is tightening up, or you're maybe noticing that you're kind of leaning away, maybe not hands up, but energetically, I might feel it as that. We just have to honor that in the moment. There's something about one's life experiences as well as their nervous system that's slightly triggered. And I'm always trying to help decrease that experience, to help people. Like I said, when I learned about the vagus nerve and I thought, I don't know the question. Well, I've learned the question. The question for me is, what really is the key to improved health and the healing effects of trauma? It's teaching people about self-regulation. It's teaching them how to work their vagal brake. Let me put the brakes on that stress response.
Right. So you and I talk about the vagus nerve and vagal tone and all that. So why don't you share the importance of the enteric nervous system, as we're talking, people are watching, so you get an understanding of why that vagus nerve and vagal tone is so important and how it was overlooked for many years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And everybody's
And
in fight or flight, so they're shoulders up, ready to go.
right, right.
But the vagal tone is extremely important. So in your practice, I want to talk about vagal tone, and I want to talk about the importance of, like we said, the brain's one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the mind's another thing, but they're synergistic of each other, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah. Oh,
when we
sure.
talk about, that conventional medicine is like, well, you know what, you must be depressed, here's a medicine, and
Correct.
it
Correct.
hits the brain, but
Mm-hmm.
we got to get to the mind, right? So we have to do that deep work. And a lot of
Yes.
folks, there's some apprehension to do deep work, right? It's hard.
Oh, it is
It's
hard.
hard
Like
to
I
go
say to
inward, man.
people,
It is.
I
Why?
totally acknowledge that with people. I like, what you see is what you get. I say to people, I am on purpose as transparent as possible because I try to live this medicine as well as teach this medicine. And if I'm this transparent, I decrease the risk of triggering these, really, your vagal response. So that
Mhm.
fight or flight and that vagal tone. So we know that the vagus nerve, right, 10th cranial nerve, it's that, they call it that wandering nerve because it starts in the back of
Yep.
the brain, and it literally, what we call, innervates or activates or affects all of the systems, all the organ systems, and it literally goes into our gut. And the vagus nerve has an ancient side and a modern side. And the ancient side, I say to people, that's what gets hijacked in trauma, because that's the part of our autonomic nervous system that we can't control for good reason, right? Like, you could say to me, hey, hold your breath, and I would, but sooner or later, that autonomic part is going to kick in and I'm going to start breathing again, right? Now, the modern side of the vagus has everything to do with our history of relationships, attachment. And I say to people, don't forget, we are higher order mammals wired to bond. So, yes, we have that primitive part of our brainstem that I say to people is a reptile, right? But then our brain developed beyond that so that we have this mammalian brain. And in that mammalian brain, we are wired to bond, attachment. And so that modern vagus is so intelligent. It literally works these fine muscles around our mouth because when we're smiling, we are naturally wanting more of a connection, and we lower the guard of other people. So then, energetically, physically, on an attachment, caring, nurturing level, we are drawn to one another, right? And in other aspects of the animal kingdom, they have their own way in the mammal, and that part of the kingdom, right? I always say to people, we're the top of the food chain in the mammalian world.
Right.
But guess what? In traditional Chinese medicine, we know yin and yang, right? Positive and negative. And that means everything has a positive aspect, everything has a negative. The negative thing is, oh, wow, we have totally evolved as humans. So we have this amazing big neocortex, like the biggest of all the mammals. Well, the problem is the animal kingdom actually learns how to get rid of overactivated stress response and trauma from their body better than we do as humans. So that's why I say to people, it really is mind, body, brain, spirit medicine, because the mind piece, that's what most people know is mindset. So I
Hmm.
say to them, that's the area that's involved with your thoughts, the content of your thoughts, your beliefs, your values, right? Your brain is the actual, like I say, the mechanics and the working of it.
Right. You talked about the breathing, and we see patients, and they're in this, right, and we see that with our gut patients, we
Hmm.
see it with our autoimmune patients,
Yes.
or chronic pain patients, and I'm like, breathe, like, what? I'm like,
Hmm.
lay your shoulders down and breathe. So
Hmm.
how much of though do you feel we have moved in this direction, where maybe the animal kingdom hasn't, but we have, but for self-preservation,
Hmm.
right? I mean, we start doing things for self-preservations, right? So
Yes.
how does that play a role in things that we do in that fight or flight in what you see? So are you going to look at this from, again, you say, what they feel most comfortable with,
Hmm.
Ayurvedic and
Hmm.
traditional Chinese. Now, in Ayurvedic, is there more? Do you do herbs and stuff like that from that?
Now, I myself am not an herbalist, but what
Okay.
I do is I help them. If Ayurvedic medicine is something that they have a curiosity, so I teach them first to subtly tune in to their mindset awareness, right? But
Hmm.
also their body. So I use sort of like Deepak Chopra's phrase where he has said, like, pay attention to the whispers in the universe, right? Because they are uniquely yours. So when I mention some of these different things, I will have some clients say, oh, I do yoga, or I've thought of yoga. I've never heard the phrase Ayurvedic medicine. So I feel like from at least a number of the people that I interact with, probably Ayurvedic medicine is the least known and understood. But helping them understand their constitution and teaching them about the doshas, right, can help if they're interested. So again, I'm only using it as an offering, not as a prescription. And it's very eclectic. And so far, what a lot of people, the feedback that I get is they like the opportunity to almost experience it like a menu where it allows them to kind of get their feet wet a little and it ends up relaxing them enough so that they understand, oh, wait, this isn't scary. Because we know that things that are different, weird, end up creating a mindset of, nope, that's too weird, no can do, right? So we're already
Hmm.
using a mindset block,
Oh,
or
yeah.
our body, we're going to tighten up, which right? We're going to resist.
Yep.
And then we're probably not going to follow through with any of the suggestions anyway. So I say to people, this is me role modeling empowerment from the very first conversation. Like if something I'm saying lights you up, or even maybe lights you up is too much energy medicine, but if it makes you go, and lean in, then we go with that. And then that helps me decide as a practitioner, okay, well, what strategies might I recommend? Because, or what other even practitioners might I recommend, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm not an herbalist, but there are certain types of, in Ayurveda, which again, these are actually considered whole medical systems in other parts of the world.
Right.
So we could probably spend weeks just talking about Ayurvedic medicine and the aspects of it. The same for TCM, because they use the way they help diagnose is with tongue,
Hmm.
and they also use pulse as a diagnosis. So we have some of these aspects in Western medicine, but not to the same degree that they use in TCM.
Right.
And they all are kind of connected to all of these five element theory, realizing that everything is made up of either earth, water, air,
Wind.
ether,
Yeah.
these kinds of things. And so for some people that come to see me, they'll say to me, I don't want to know all that. I just need to, and then maybe it's they want to reduce a symptom or they want to help understand themselves better. And so then at that point, it may be, okay, let's pique your curiosity a little. So like indigenous medicine, for me, on my own, I found myself curious about Native American spirit medicine. And then I started to see the connections between these other world medicines that I had been trained in for my doctorate. And I thought, huh. So I, on my own, started learning about the medicine wheel, learned about animal spirit cards and symbolism, because energy medicine teaches people how to pay attention to synchronicity. And I say to people, this kind of work that I'm doing, it is very deep, because I'm well aware that on the health side of it, part of what led me to get my doctorate in mind body medicine and to do the research that I did for my dissertation was because my curious self said, hang on, I am seeing some kind of connection between my clients that have had early childhood trauma and they were developing chronic health conditions in later life. And I thought, now, let me tell you, traditional psychotherapy doesn't teach you that.
Right.
So I thought, I've got to know more. I got to go deeper. And like we know, well, inflammation is really the key there, right? And so finding this overlap of how might I help people understand how your depression that you're experiencing that affects the way you feel, the way you think, the way you interact with others, your relationships, your work performance, right? All of it that people know as mental health could also have really important root causes that by doing something like taking an antidepressant, it's only going to help the symptom level, right? It's not going to help you get to the root. And obviously, gut health is a huge part of this. So I say to people now, I find it's important to teach people about those interconnections between their mental health, their gut health, and their immune health. And then really, because I'm what I call myself like an interventionist, people want the tools, they want suggestions, they want interventions. So I literally help them kind of expose themselves to it at the pace they're comfortable with different types of strategies, whether it's journaling, guided imagery, obviously teaching them how to breathe.
Right.
You know, we know you can sit with a person and you can tell by looking at them, they're what I call the breath holders. So people that have anxiety, whether they are aware of it or not, diagnosed with it or not, they usually are breath holders. They're needing to do this, right? That long exhale.
Yep.
And I say to them, let's teach you first how to just do belly breathing, to learn how to just slightly elongate your exhale, because that helps that parasympathetic nervous system, that helps that vagal break. It helps to have it come back online, right? So even little simple tricks and tools are some of my favorite things that I learn and try to teach other people, because in all honesty, like I have expensive equipment and I love that stuff and I'm a biofeedbacker and I can geek out about that, but I'm not going to lie. In my own life, I'm going to use the stuff that I don't need special equipment for.
Right. But, often it's met with, but doctor, how is this going to help me?
Right.
So how is breathing going to help me? Right.
Sure.
I mean, I'm used to lifting weights. I want to lift weights. I want to, that's where it's at. And like, we got to breathe. Right. So I find there's a lot of times pushback from patients. And again, you got to meet them where they're at. Right.
Yes.
So when they come in, I try to explain how that gut and the immune system work together, how the gut, immune, and cardiometabolic work together, how the gut, immune, cardiometabolic movement and breathing work together, and then sleep, right? I mean,
we can't forget sleep.
Right. I'm going to try to do this without meds.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that meds are bad. I just think, like you said, it's just a complement, a part of the whole wellness when we think about how to get somebody better, how to optimize their health.
That's it. It's and like probably similar to yourself, when they're asking legitimate questions, right?
Sure.
Because whether we like it or not, we're all socialized in what I call now like the life hack movement. And I have had so many people, even before there was such a thing as life hack, and please give me the 5 magical steps or the 12 things I need to do. And I'll say to people, I respect that and I understand that. And there's a part of me sometimes too that wants a quicker result. But I will say in full transparency, I think I ought to advertise myself as the anti-life hack person, because what I have learned from living this medicine, from learning it and living it, is the more we practice any of these things that resonate with us, the better we get at it, right? Mastery isn't something in anything. And so the person who's a weightlifter, guess what? They didn't master their craft of weightlifting overnight. They practiced, they had discipline because it mattered to them. So just like you're doing, I would use, certainly for athletes that I've worked with, and people that are into the performance-based stuff, right? Which is great because they are really motivated. They want things they can measure. Sometimes what's harder for them is when I'm saying to them, I am now interacting, when we are only in performance-based self, we are only working with left brain, logic, language, task. I try to help them to understand their right brain, which is also, and I use all different kinds of words for this. I explain to them, right brain is our expressive self, it's our creative, artistic self. Then when I bring energy and spirit medicine into it, which is also a component of both TCM and Ayurveda and even tribal medicine, I explain to them the left side of the body is spiritually and energetically connected to our feminine qualities, or what they call the divine feminine. And let me back up. I want to let everyone know that we all have feminine and masculine sides, and that is regardless of our biological gender, as well as regardless of how we identify ourselves. And then I teach them that the right side of the body is associated with masculine and the traits that are typically connected to strength and power and career. And all of this is without judgment. So it's basically helping people to understand themselves better through this lens of self-compassion and self-loving kindness. And I say to them, it has to start here. It's like that metaphor of being on the airplane, right? Got to put the oxygen on yourself first, not on your child. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? That seems wrong. And I'm like, well, what good are you going to do for your child if you're not here? Like, this is about self-care. It is about tuning into, what am I comfortable with? What am I willing to do? And who are the people, places, and things that I need to connect with in my life to help support me in maintaining this kind of like self-care path and journey,
Right.
you know?
Or disconnect, right?
Right.
Or
Oh,
disconnect,
exactly.
right? So,
Yes.
a shout out to my cousin who's a bereavement counselor, Dr. Yvonne Kaye. I mean, she gave me the statements that, you know what? DNA does not mean obligation,
I love that. I
right?
love that.
And when she told me that, it really hit home because, again,
Mhm.
sometimes you have to disconnect with certain people for you to actually move ahead.
Yes.
And yes, maybe it's self-preservation, that's fine. But
Mhm.
again, DNA doesn't mean obligation because it's sad, but a lot of times it's people that we love that often have a tendency to hold us back,
Yes.
and they
Eh,
have a
yes.
tendency to put what happened, their experiences to them on you. Oh, that won't work.
Right.
Right? You can
Right.
never get there. Right? I
Right.
used to hear that stuff all the time. I'm like, well, maybe we can, right?
Right.
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 So
Right. Because
how do
on the
right,
mental
how do
health
we
level,
teach?
that's projection. That's what we
Right,
call projection.
right,
So it's about teaching the person to understand what we know is their attachment history. So again, we're higher order mammals wired to bond, and our attachment bonds are our most impactful relationships. Typically, that's your family of origin, the people
mhm,
that brought you into the world, that, yes, you also share their genetic makeup, their DNA. But that's why in reality, we'll never probably get to the bottom of the nature
right,
versus nurture argument, right?
right,
So I say to people, okay, well, you cannot maybe change parts of your genetics, but look what we're learning from the Genome Project. Maybe
mhm,
not all these genes get to be flipped on. And then when you start to learn the importance of stress management and how stress is definitely toxic when there's too much of it, how about looking at all those spheres of wellness, right, in your life, your social wellness, your emotional wellness, your financial wellness, physical wellness. I mean, this is just to name a few off the top of my head. And then looking at with a true, honest experience, which is hard to do. That's why we have to have self loving kindness. We have to have self compassion. We also have to hold compassion for others and forgiveness for others, because it is important for us to be able to care enough about ourselves, to heal our inner wounds enough so we know that we are worthy of leading a healthier life,
Hmm.
following a healthier path. And that may mean changing some of the relationships with the people, places, and things that we're the most familiar with.
Right.
And
Now,
it's not easy, right?
it's
This
not,
isn't
it's
easy
again,
stuff.
it's not easy, but being a black belt isn't easy. It doesn't happen overnight. When I
That's right.
change, nutrition around for patients and they have, seriously gut issues, and I'm like, they're like 2 weeks, it hasn't changed. I'm like, 2 weeks, 10 years. It's
Yeah,
not going to happen overnight.
right.
You talked about compassion. I want to read this to you.
Hmm.
When we experience self-compassion, that is when we see that which makes us different makes us beautiful.
Oh, I recognize those words. They're mine.
They're yours, right?
Yes, they are.
So I saw that and I thought, I want to talk about that. Right? I want
Hmm.
to talk about that compassion.
Yes.
Some
Yes.
people say, like in the medical field, in our traditional, conventional medicine, they feel a lot of people lost compassion. I mean, with
Yeah.
how people responded to one another and reacted to one another through all of this pandemic, they
Yes.
see that compassion is at its lowest.
Yes.
So
And
let's talk about compassion.
oh, yeah, because I mean, let's face it. I've said to people, number one, just like the yin and the yang, right? All kinds of negative things have come about due to the pandemic, which we all kind of recognize and know on a global level, as well as many people have been affected on a personal level. However, there are also, as crazy as this might sound, some positive things that have come out of it, specifically for mental health, because now mental health is a topic on most people's minds.
Hmm.
So, this whole concept that I've dealt with my whole career really in mental health of stigma, the pandemic has decreased that. So, I've said to people, look, I get it. You maybe have never experienced a what we call in traditional, psychology or psychiatry, a diagnosable mental health condition, but you've noticed all of a sudden you're kind of obsessive compulsive about germs, or you are finding yourself experiencing the real hardcore symptoms of anxiety, ruminating thinking, right? Agoraphobic almost, because look at what self quarantining will
Sure.
do to people. And what I do is I help them to just talk about that. I model compassion by saying, yeah, I literally say to people, let's just keep it real, folks. Like, everybody has felt those things, me included. So I say to them, and I'm the one who's been practicing these things for 35 years. So if it can happen to me and it's happening to you, that's okay. You're not alone. Let's work on, and it's funny because some important components of this actually were brought up by Dr. Porges in a podcast that he did recently that I was able to attend. And he talked about how the pandemic has actually affected our survival brain so deeply. It's caused more division, the us versus them mentalities,
Hmm.
this animosity, right? And it's very uncomfortable for mind, body, brain practitioners like myself, who I also feel these things as a tuning fork in my body. So it's very uncomfortable. And I know a lot of clients that I work with have that same ability to feel the vibrations around them. And so I say to them, let's first bring our energy in with self loving kindness, self compassion, so that we then can be in a better place. That when we come across a person whose nervous system is, they're in full on fight, and you know who they are. They're like ready to get in an argument. They're almost like
Hmm.
trying to pick a fight with you about something, right?
Yeah.
And our natural inclination as higher order mammals is to, depending on your life history, you're going to fight or you're going to flee. That's what
Right.
our brain does. And if we can't do either of those things, well, guess what? That's where that darn freeze thing comes in. And it is called muscle paralysis, literally tonic immobility. We freeze. That's part
Right.
of our autonomic system because the mammals do that. And if you ever watch like Animal Planet or the Discovery Channel,
Sure.
it's
Sure.
awesome to see it. And specifically a special type of mountain goat. This happens to them, they literally appear dead.
Yeah.
And we still have that as part of our ancient wiring because, well, if the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, it doesn't want to eat something it thinks is already dead.
Right.
But the problem as these higher order mammals that we are, guess what happens? We don't know we're in freeze. So then the tension, the energy, the quantum physics of it, plus the emotion of it gets stuck all here in our mind, body, and our brain. And then it ends up manifesting in all these ways, including sometimes not being able to have compassion for other people. You might just be seeing them as your enemy, your foe, right? So we know that parasympathetic nervous system is all about friend. It's tend and befriend versus fight.
Right.
So I say to people, even if you could just slightly open yourself up, just even a little bit, always tiny bits matter, because it's an opening, right? And Rumi, who was like a famous Sufi
Mhm.
philosopher, one of my favorite like quotes from Rumi is, focus on the broken places because that's where the light enters. And so I say to people, what if we're able to live this in our life and then also hold that space and energy for other people when we're with them? And I think we are all capable of this. Maybe it might be harder for some of us than others. And I definitely feel this I feel so much for even my conventional medical colleagues because many of them did not go into conventional medicine so they could feel burnt out,
Right.
feel like they don't have the kind of compassion as healers that drew them to go through all the things you go through
Right.
to be in your profession, right? So it's really about even if I maybe don't fully understand someone's situation, I'm trying to do the best I can because we all have biases too. We're part of the human condition,
Sure. Sure.
but try to be as open as I can to hold that compassion in my heart. And there are meditations that people can practice. And there's even, right, heart math, heart
Mhm.
centered breathing
Sure.
teaches us how to breathe in through our heart center and breathe out from our heart center. And the more you practice these techniques, it gets easier to know when you're there, you
So,
know?
and that's so true. So, but we're stuck, right? Many of us are
Yeah.
stuck in these shores. We don't know how to navigate
Hmm.
forward.
Right.
So I want to talk about forgiveness.
Yes. Oh,
Um, I want to talk about forgiveness on like how do we tell the people those damn people they didn't wear the mask. I don't like them. Those people, wear the mask, they're weak.
hmm,
Where do we come in? Where do we come in the middle and just, what about forgiveness? How does one learn to create and put out forgiveness?
see, this is why, like you and I said, we could spend days
Right,
talking,
right.
right? Because the thing you ask is something that I say to people. I am well aware forgiveness is one of the most complicated parts of our life path, and self forgiveness even harder, right? Because when we aren't able to forgive ourselves in our psyche, which is the mind part, it creates all these shadow parts of ourselves that we know is shame, blame, that we end up projecting out all over the place into the world, even onto our own kids inadvertently, or our colleagues, our partners, right? Our neighbors, people in our community. And I say to people, forgiveness is like everything important. It's like a multi-stage process. And I'd love to tell you that it's linear, right? Kind of like the stages of grief. Like, let me tell you, the 5 stages of grief, it's not, your left brain isn't going to like this very
Right,
much, but you're not going to go, ooh, stage one, I'm done. Oh, I
right.
can move on to stage two.
Check,
Oh,
move
awesome.
forward.
Yeah, right. Let me check those boxes. Oh, I wish. Really? But in truth, forgiveness is partially what happens in our mind, but it's also what happens in our body. And it even happens, like I say, the mind of the thoughts are, I explain to people, this is about emotion. You think and you talk about your emotions up here. Guess what, though? We feel and experience our emotions in our soma, in our body, right? So part of it is being able to feel safe enough, self regulated, grounded, whatever the right words are for people, so that you're okay being vulnerable. And that's tricky because many people who have had a lot of trauma in their life, every part of their wiring tells them it is not safe to be vulnerable. So sometimes first we have to help you. It has to start with safety. It has to start with that vagal tone. It has to start with getting you grounded. So then you can sit with the honest feelings of hurt, disappointment, anger, confusion, so that you can find your path to forgiveness. Right. So some
Mhm.
people will say, oh, no, I've forgiven that person. And then we actually do a deeper dive and we find out, well,
Mhm.
in your thinking head, you forgave them, which is a good start, but you didn't really do the work that was trapped in your body. Like we know, functional medicine, integrative medicine, the issues are in the tissues, right?
Right.
So it gets trapped here. And that's where that it's always continuing to say, all right, well, what would forgiveness feel like if you felt it in your heart? What would it look like and sound like if you allowed yourself to manifest that outwardly in your words and your actions, and therefore in your relationships? What might it feel like if someone did that for you, right? What would it look like, sound like? Because I explain to people the only person we will ever be able to control is ourself. That's it. So it has to start with me, right?
Right. And you talked about there's something very important, and that is the language. It's the
Mhm.
words that we use. And
Mhm.
I can tell you, I mean, Francis will echo this, 4 years ago, it's straightforward. The exam is the exam, what you have, what you come in with, all that, and the model has changed, moved into that functional medicine model.
Mhm.
It's very interesting, the language, the terminology I hear when people talk, how they see themselves maybe as sickly, or they
Yes.
see themselves as, a manifestation. Mom and dad had it, therefore I'm like them,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
the language that people use, I drop a pen, oh God, I'm such an idiot.
Right. Right.
It may sound not like a big deal, and I'll listen. I do it to myself. I mean, like, what the hell were you
Sure.
thinking, right? So I make it
Sure.
all the time, but
Mhm.
that language is really important.
It is. It is.
So when, we hear all about young kids, I think, my God, we should be teaching young children about language, about compassion, about mind, body at the
Mhm.
age of 3,
Yes.
not at the age of 33, right? Because I mean,
Yes.
think about all the work and all that magic they could have and
Mhm.
learn and do,
Mhm.
and also protect themselves, make themselves stronger if they knew that at a younger age. 'Cause
Absolutely.
there is so much trauma that
Mhm.
goes on. So, what about, if you can touch base on, the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Event Study,
Yes.
and how what you said, intergenerational, how it goes from one
Mhm.
to the other. That'd be great to talk about.
Yes. So for people that may not be familiar with that ACEs study, so ACE is an acronym, Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's quite famous in the trauma world. For instance, I believe that it originated around 1998, so it's been around a very long time. And basically, what this is a questionnaire, and it's asking you very, very specific questions in a yes or no format if you've experienced a variety of traumatic events prior to the age of 18. Because what the researchers, Felitti et al., for the ACEs study, found over the course of their work, and many other researchers have come since then and have tied their research to this ACEs study, what we've learned is that statistically, there is a positive correlation. That means both things go up at the same time. So the more adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, that you've had in early childhood prior to the age of 18, the greater the likelihood of developing a chronic physical condition as well as a mental health condition in later life. And so that in the 1990s, like, that hit
Yeah,
the world
huge.
by storm. Like, what are you talking about? How can there be this correlation? And on average, and granted, I'll be looking forward to reading research post pandemic,
Yeah,
right? That
for
hopefully
sure.
somebody's gathering somewhere, because at that point, prior to the pandemic, on average, the average person has experienced 3 adverse childhood experiences or events. And so you need to understand, they're asking things like, did anyone verbally insult you, put you down? Did somebody physically do that? These are all separate questions. Did somebody touch you inappropriately? So it's hitting all the big, what we call abuses. But then it's also asking you, or what we call the big T traumas, but it's also asking you, did either one of your parents have an addiction? Did either one of your parents experience diagnosed or undiagnosed emotional issues? Because when we talk about the neurobiology of the brain, and I teach all of my clients about mirror neurons in the brain and how we end up being influenced by these early experiences, we create meaning or our story or our narrative around these experiences, and that begins to form our language. So just like you're saying with your patients, you can hear, you've tuned in, you're attuned, we would call it in attachment,
Mhm.
you're attuned to the words they're using in describing themselves. Minimally, they are sharing their inner self-talk with you, right?
Right.
Negative self-talk is something that not only affects our mental health, but it definitely affects your stress response. Like, we
Mhm.
could attach electrodes to you. We could measure your heart rate variability, which are those changes in our heart rate from the beginning of something to the end. And, does it go back to whatever our baseline heart rate is? We could put a blood pressure cuff on you. We could look at your blood pressure. These are just some ways for the left brain people. They're like, well, how do we know it's really connected? Because there's always a little bit of that skepticism, and
Sure.
I respect that. But it's about helping you look at and understand. The beautiful thing is you were not born with those thoughts in your head, those beliefs, that narrative. We do have to help you do a deeper dive to find out the root cause, like where the heck did that come from? So in trauma work, what we do is we help you understand the connection, and then we help you uncouple it so you can relearn it in another way, which is why I love neuroplasticity of the
Mhm.
brain and all that good stuff.
But we're often told, what does not kill us will make us stronger.
Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
there are some experiences I wish, like, I didn't have. So I don't need to, sometimes, like, I don't need to be that strong. All right, I'm ready to move on. Right, I got to skip that experience. Right, no reason to
Yeah.
have that.
Right.
So where does resiliency come in? Right, because I mean, we do learn from these experiences. It sometimes it does make us stronger because we see the opposite. If you pamper and pamper and pamper, you
Hmm.
don't really grow. Right, so
No.
how do we find that balance? Because you need to have some experience. Hopefully,
Hmm.
it's a good experience. But
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of people where it's like life has been, just a sailing beautiful ship, and one small thing happens,
Hmm.
and they're crushed,
Right.
right?
It tips their Apple Card or their
Right.
house
So,
of
I mean,
cards falls over.
I remember I dated this young lady, and she was A's, man. She didn't even have to study, and she got
Hmm.
an A, right? And I'm
Hmm.
busting my butt hoping for the B.
Hmm.
Then she got to college.
Yeah.
It was different. And
Yes.
she got her first C,
Hmm.
and she was crushed.
Oh, yeah.
I was happy. It's
Right.
retribution, right? That's the mind. It's like, now you know what it's like.
Exactly. Now you can relate.
Now you can relate. So
Hmm.
where does resiliency, how does somebody take these experiences, and how does somebody build resiliency? Because we need to have it, because sometimes it seems, man, we're just not as strong. And in the pandemic, it really, really got to a lot of people, and, in their position, rightfully so. So
Yeah.
how do we come back from that, right? I mean, we can teach somebody how to lift a kettlebell and get stronger, right? So
Hmm.
how do we teach somebody to get stronger in the mind body connection? How do we do that?
So for me, I look at it as we have to get comfortable again feeling our feelings. You see, we live in an age where everyone is disconnected. They literally are like, if anyone ever watched the show Scrubs from the 90s,
Sure.
like an episode of Floating Head Doctor, right? The head was just floating through the hall, but the body was somewhere else. Like, that's kind of how we are. And we all can go through this. Like, I go through it sometimes too, where I literally have to pause and go, wait a second. I feel pretty disconnected because maybe I'm checking out, right? So, one of the ways back, in my opinion anyway, is helping people to feel their feelings in their body. And I believe I learned some of these strategies as an addiction specialist for years because people are often self medicating with substances. And depending on their substance of choice, it'll give you a little bit of an indication of what emotions are they trying to avoid, right? So,
Mhm.
for instance, we know prescription opioids are really, really effective for pain.
Right.
Well, guess what? There's a parallel there. You're very likely wanting to avoid some emotional pain as well. So if we have a habit of needing to numb out, we aren't giving our mind, body, brain, and spirit systems an opportunity to literally what I call like flex their muscles, right? We're just we're using something as a distraction. And I get that part of what I'm saying is I'm even listening to what I'm saying. I'm like, oh boy, I know this is not really what people want to hear the most about. Because it's hard to acknowledge that maybe one of the ways to get back to a stronger part of ourself, ironically and paradoxically, is for us to be able to build healthier relationships, create healthier communities, healthier relationship first with myself, healthier relationships with others, so that we can continue to do what we call in energy medicine hold space. So the part of me that is a nationally certified healing touch practitioner, which is hands-on energy medicine, it is, as far as I know, the only medical approved model of energy medicine. So it's
Mm-hmm.
similar to Reiki, but oftentimes, depending on the orientation of, say, like a hospital, if it has a religious orientation, they tend to feel very nervous and scared about Reiki. So healing touch was started like 50 years ago by a
Right.
nurse. And this is it's all about helping us to do what we call clear our chakras and raise our vibration. To me, that helps us have stronger constitutions, not only spiritually but emotionally and physically, because I measured in my own research for my dissertation the effectiveness of two mind body medicine strategies, and I kept it simple: belly breathing and guided imagery. And because it was, doctoral research, it needed to go through the IRB, right, the review board, and it did. But they understandably wanted to have the least impact on my participants. And as a result of that, I couldn't actually teach them these things. I couldn't train them. I couldn't have them come in more than one time. So I did one exposure with my small group of women. So I had 15 adult women who
Mm-hmm.
were diagnosed with some type of thyroid disease, because I am all about that inflammation, autoimmunity. And I've said to people, do you understand that autoimmunity metaphorically means you are your own worst enemy? And when you are a negative self-talker, aren't you also your own worst enemy, right? So that mental health, immune, and I didn't do any gut health component because that would have been asking too much. The
Right.
IRB, that would have pushed them right over the edge. So what I did was I did one 8-minute exposure on either teaching them diaphragmatic or belly breathing, and then having them practice it, as well as guided imagery. And I separated the group of women up, 8 in one group, 7 in the other. I measured 3 things. I measured mood with a standardized questionnaire. I also measured their heart rate variability, and with biofeedback equipment with electrodes. And I also wanted to bring in, because my curiosity in the immune system, I thought I need to see, do these mind body medicine interventions do anything to our immune response, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because I have worked in traditional Western medicine. So I've worked in emergency departments and literally had colleagues that are traditional MD level people, and we'd be sharing the same patient, and they would be kind of giving me hard resistance to even thinking that some of these things are real medicine, right? I can't even tell you how many times I've said to conventional trained MDs, no, psychosomatic medicine is real. Like they even have a journal for it,
Right.
if you don't believe me. you know but I also I took saliva samples in my office, and I measured a pro-inflammatory cytokine, interleukin 1 beta, that prior to the pandemic most people never even heard the
Right.
word
Right. Right.
cytokine.
Right.
Now the pandemic, people are like, woo. And I did my research in actually 2014, so it was well before the pandemic. And what I found is that just one 8-minute one time, it affected each of those things affected those three markers in certain ways, including with some statistical significance. And so I say to people, hey, you know how you can build your resistance? Make a commitment to yourself to practice even one of those strategies. If 8 minutes seems too long, okay, pick 5. 5 minutes, 5 minutes out of your day.
Right.
That's a way to build your resistance, because both of those strategies actually impacted interleukin 1 beta.
Wow.
And now, granted, it both of them affected it in a way it defied logic, which is curious, right? It actually increased IL-1B, which is pro-inflammatory. So we know too much IL-1B is connected to cancer pathology. However, in Western medicine, we still don't know what is the healthy range of IL-1B. And so there are some scientists like God bless her, Candace Pert, who has since passed. She believed that a certain level of IL-1B was needed to foster resiliency in our immune response and healing and actually learning, because we now know so much about our immune system. It's intelligent. It's learning things, and then it's reacting based on what it's taking in. And so why not tap into that beautiful neocortex we have and teach ourselves some of this stuff so we can then join like a true team with our immune system and all the ways that we can do that. And like I say to people, believe me, I think there are probably thousands of right tools, and I'm always learning more.
Sure.
You know,
you talked about, you had a chance to work with medical colleagues. I'm
Mhm.
fortunate to work with medical colleagues. I mean, if I need a gastro, I got gastro, I got internist, I've got neuro, I've got pain management. I mean, we have it all, thank God, so we're close by.
Mhm.
So in your clinical office, in your presentations that you see patients,
Mhm.
when do you say, when have there been cases like, you know what, we got to bring somebody else in, right? We need
Mhm.
to really take a team approach. And then how does your medical colleagues, how do they accept what you do?
Sure. So that's always tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, part of my journey of how I got here means also logistically here. So I am located in Sussex County, Delaware, which is lower Delaware, coastal Delaware. And I moved here, which defied total logic. That's how I knew I was on my soul's path, because I made the decision to close my practice and sell my house where I had lived in Connecticut my entire life, because I started to find other like-minded colleagues, other MD level people that already understood integrative and functional medicine, already had gotten their own training, including one of my colleagues has been trained by Dr. Weil. And once we made those connections, it was like, oh, we are still working on the synergy of that, right? So like we all know, the landscape is changing, and we are part of that changing landscape. Some of my clients already have seen neurologists, primary care docs, GI docs, and they've seen other specialists. But if those specialists didn't also have maybe even not even additional training in integrative and functional medicine, but even an awareness that it exists, I have found that people come to me because they're literally just feeling these overwhelmed emotions and they don't know where else to go. So some people end up kind of like on my actual doorstep because they're like, look, I need someone to help me reassure myself that I am not crazy, that I have seen all these doctors and they tell me my labs are normal, but I don't feel good.
Right.
I feel sick, and I'll say to them, talk to me in your own language about how you feel, because just like you, I also feel the energy of their words. And I say, oh, you know what? I also, in the medicines I practice, understand that sometimes the way you talk about a symptom is actually part of that really brilliant survival part of yourself saying, could someone please listen to my words? Because my conscious mind doesn't understand why I'm telling you this symptom this way. So that's what I would say to my conventional medical docs. I'd say, can you do me a favor? I can't do what you do, right?
Right.
We're all needed here. on
Right.
this journey.
Right.
That's my feeling. So I need you to listen, feel, see, hear, use all of your wonderful senses and your skills and knowledge. Can you listen to the patient? Because when I'm listening to the patient, this is how I interpret it. Could you please share how you interpret it? And then let's literally create this beautiful support system for this mutual patient or client that we're working with. And notice, I'm not even expecting them to change the way they practice because
Right.
that's very territorial, right?
Right.
It's anxiety producing and it's going to trigger their survival response, and then we're not going to get anywhere.
Right. They're
Right?
going to be like this.
Yeah. So it's really just saying, let's just be open, because I deeply believe our body holds the wisdom in it, but we're only using what, like 3% of our brain as it is. So I'll say to people in spirit and energy medicine, trust me, I literally at times lead with what I feel in my body as a tuning fork, and my conscious mind sometimes is not caught up. And I'll tell them that my conscious mind hasn't caught up yet, but I will. My conscious mind will then be like a dog on a bone later about it, so it's about trying to keep at this little by little, having individual conversations, and then like what we're doing, right? This
Right.
is why I value and I honor this opportunity, because we're having this conversation, we're informing each other, we're each growing from it. And then anybody who's listening, including in a recorded version, some of that may land and resonate with them, and then they might empower themselves to say, wait though, because I also coach my clients in talking to their conventional docs. And I'll say to them, I'll gladly hop on a call
Yep.
with
Yep.
you. I'll do it.
They do it all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I'll say, but I also honor the fact that this is about helping you also have your voice, your
Right.
actual voice from that fifth chakra, be able to tune into your voice and have it be heard. But I will full on support you, guide you, be your cheerleader, and sometimes initially be the one to say, hang on, I'll have that voice at first.
Right.
Because it is overwhelming. And depending on the generation, now I work with people of all ages, actually. I primarily work with adults here in Delaware, but I've worked with people as young as 1 month old all the way up to the end of the lifespan in the late 90s, their ages, I mean, that depending on their generation, they're literally taught you do not have a voice with your doctor, right?
Exactly. Right. You never question the doctor. Right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I'll call doctors, and I will be honest. I mean, I have a tendency to cherry pick my referrals because I want to, I want that doctor to treat my patient like I'm treating my patient, right?
That's right. That's right.
So I have a tendency to pick doctors who actually talk with my patients, not at my patients. Right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I will cherry pick them. I think my patients should receive an excellent care, just like they're a top athlete, a top Hollywood star. And sometimes that requires me to pave the way and use, again, certain language to have that doctor kind of see what I'm seeing.
Yes.
And then give them the room to feel empowered. Right. So there are some docs who I work with and I can call them like, I've been monitoring your patient's blood pressure. We need to start them on medications. And they're like, all right, sounds good. Just have them call. We'll get it moving.
Right.
And there are some docs I got to call them like, hey, so this has been happening. What do you, pause, 1, 2, 3, think about that?
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting because you have to sometimes understand their ego, and you have to sometimes play to it, right? So that's really important.
It is
about language, and we have something we call a headache disability index. Do you ever use it at any one of those? A headache disability index?
I'm not sure that I've ever used that before.
It's really interesting. So it breaks down the headache as an emotional headache, a functional headache. And I'll say to people, tell me about your headache. And they're like, it's pounding. It's sharp pain here. I feel it up my neck, around my. Hey, tell me about your headache. I feel like my head's going to explode. I feel like someone's just taking a hammer to my head. Both cause pain.
Yes.
See, one's often is emotionally driven.
Yes.
Right. And I had the opportunity, not only from a functional medicine perspective, but doing, the laying on hands and working on these muscles here. And you're talking, and as they're talking, they could be talking about an event that happened. And this is just these shoulders, like their football pads are coming up, right? And then we just talk them in another direction and they come down, right? So again, that language, those words are so
Yes.
important. I read once before, and you talked to us that people who don't speak up have throat issues,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
you hear that, and initially, I have to be honest with you, I'm like, all right, whatever, and I throw it off, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even. I'm like, you know what? I can't touch that. It's not scientific enough for me. I'm not going to touch it, right? Because I'm hardcore science, right?
I get
Pause,
that. I
repeat,
respect
pause,
that.
repeat, right? Right? I should
Yeah.
get this thing. Did this? Got this? Did it? Right?
Yeah.
But then I stepped out of my own way and started going, here it is again. Here it is again. Oh, and there it is, right? So now I'm
You
starting to
saw
see
the
the pattern.
pattern. You
Right.
started
See the
respecting the
pattern. So,
pattern.
there really is something to that language. There really is something to breathing. There really is something to that mind body connection. And somebody who says, well, I really don't buy into that. If it's a professional, if it's a doc,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, can I push this boulder up a hill, or I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Well, and believe me, I feel your pain around that, because it's harder for me, because I say to people, yes, I'm a doctor, but I'm PhD level doctor. So in the world of MD, DO, DC, right? Those credentials, oftentimes I realize, uh-oh, I probably am going to have to push part of this boulder uphill, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I am very, very transparent. So my clients are well aware from the very beginning. They know, like, for instance, if I'm referring someone, I'll say to them, I either am familiar with that person's work and their mindset, their practice, their model, or I'm not. Oh, and then I'll even share different things that maybe I'll even say to them, how about if we ask your doctor, the new doctor that you're going to go to, maybe these 4 or 5 questions?
Right.
Because really, I'm teaching them how to test the water,
Yep.
right? And this is true. I mean, I can tell you, early in my career, 30 years ago, the majority of the doctors I work with were psychiatrists back then, not primary care docs at all. And uh, and obviously many traditional trained psychiatrists. Thankfully, I'm so excited. There's integrative
Right.
psychiatry, which I'm super excited about. But back in those days, no, there was no such thing that I saw that was like that. And so it was really about helping that doctor to understand that there was even something to just the talk therapy part of what I was doing, never mind some of this. And so I find that if we're getting really frustrated as practitioners, right, we have to check our own self-care,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oxygen
Yep.
on self. I have to decide. That's why I made the decision. Ooh, this is going to amp up my stress response, that I'm going to move from the place I'm familiar with, which I never thought I would leave, and go and live somewhere else, because I recognize the need for us to have a like minded tribe as practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know, which is the part of my grassroots sort of clinical social worker training from 35 years ago, is that grassroots matters. So if I'm empowering a client one person at a time, or even in my group membership program, a group at a time, guess
Sure.
what? They're going out there and they're having a voice. And the whole mind, body, brain, spirit medicine about the throat. So I did research on thyroid disorder, because I was fascinated by the thyroid, because we know it's the master regulator
Mm-hmm.
gland in the body. Guess what is here? The throat chakra. So many people that have, especially autoimmune thyroid conditions,
Sure.
they don't have a voice.
Right.
And the voice that they hear in their head is negative self-talk. They're their own worst enemy. And so I kind of learned this as I went, and was like, oh, so there's the synchronicity. Like, I was sort of divinely led to understand these things. So it's all about just helping, even when we're talking with MD colleagues. Okay, how can we help decrease their nervous system reaction a little bit, to say, look, you are very helpful to the patient. That's why we need you on the team. But it does have to be a team. So for those that really aren't interested in team, no, I often will
Right.
say to the client, can you feel that out in your body? Because I tell them the truth about me. That's how I select the people that I hire to work for me. Because we're all patients of somebody, right?
Sure. Sure. Sure.
So I
Although
say, I
my,
just need you to be right. I need you to be open to
right. Right.
the way I think, or the way I'm communicating my experience to you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I will say I think my primary care doc doesn't care for me that much because I always come in like, did you read this? Did you read? It's like, listen, I didn't read anything. You just like, here's he goes, I'll review the blood work you already took on yourself, right? So I try to look for that primary care doc, and again, I'm very fortunate to work with quite a few of them who just sits back and really looks at them from, and I'll give you a great throwback from that Marcus Welby perspective, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
person walks in the room. I mean, I work with this one team. I mean, when they're done, I mean, I don't know who else to go to. I mean, they're that Marcus Welby.
Yeah.
This, and if anybody's watching doesn't know Marcus Welby is, I mean, he was this doctor who just commanded, this great aura. He had a great aura, but it was compassion, right?
That's
he
it.
sat down and spoke with the patient.
That's right.
And listen, nothing against a lot of primers. They're stuck, man.
They're totally burnt out.
It's huge.
Yes.
Right? And people get so mad at them. I'm like, you can't get mad at them. It's not they didn't get into it to deliver the care they're giving you now.
No, and it's not bringing the majority of them joy. And because other things that I used to do earlier in my career, I was trying to help people on this practitioners on a mental health level with their self-care to help prevent burnout, because I also read the science of the statistics of addiction and suicide, etc., in the helping professions. So I look at it as, no, I don't want to hold all that negative energy towards the doctors that are literally, when they're honest, they'll admit, this doesn't bring me joy. I'm burnt out. Their stress responses are totally overregulated. And that's not why they went into a healing profession. They didn't.
Correct.
So, but I also say, how do we, again, because we do have and I'll say this from my own opinion. My own professional opinion is I do hold myself to a higher standard as a practitioner, because I consider the work I do, no matter how deep or how long I have the blessing to work with a person, as sacred work, no matter how I'm providing the service or all the services I'm trained in. And so as a result of that, I need to try to do the best I can. And I tell people, oh no, I'm not perfect. I keep it real, people. I will tell you that, when it comes to lifestyle medicine, like looking at healthy habits and self-care, am I perfect at it? No. So if you are looking for a practitioner that tells you that they're perfect, I'm not that person.
Yeah, run the other way.
Yeah.
In my office, it's kind of like my thought has always been, if I can ease somebody's pain, and make them laugh a little bit, because I think humor is huge.
Humor is huge medicine.
You know what? I've done a good job that day, right? So I've done a good job.
That's
All
right.
right. So here's the thing. So we've covered so much material. I still have more questions on my sheet. I'm going to let that go for our second one. Listen, where does one begin, right? Can you share, first of all, what book are you reading right now?
Okay. So right off the top of my head, the book I'm reading right now is Drop Acid by Dr. Perlmutter. Literally just hot off the press.
That makes one think, right, about the whole uric acid idea, right? So we can talk about, cardiometabolic for next time. I mean, again,
I know we have to control our geek out. We have to control our geek out.
Another one, but I can't wait for that. I'm reading Cara Fitzgerald's Younger You.
Oh,
have you read that one?
I have not read that one.
Yeah, that's been really, really good. So where can a patient start? What book can you recommend for them to at least start here, right? If they're looking at TCM, Ayurvedic, mind, body, and that not like a textbook, something that they can read and go, wow, this is tangible. I can touch this. I can work with this.
And this is harder because I have so many clients ask me for that one book, and it is difficult because so far, right, I haven't found the book, right?
Okay.
It's more like there are books on Ayurvedic healing that are not really designed for self-help. The tough part about TCM, I don't think I even own any what I would consider self-help TCM books. But there are certain books that I've gravitated towards that I think help introduce some of the things that I'm sharing. And really, it's Dr. Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief.
Okay.
So he's kind of he's talking from that left brain science way, which for some people, that's a more comfortable way to get into this, right? So that's where he is coming from a scientific perspective, but he's talking about quantum physics. He's talking about energy. He's bringing in our beliefs and our consciousness and some of this deeper stuff. One of the fun ways, which I say really super simple, fun, hopefully won't trigger your nervous system or stress you out in any way at all, is you can look at what are called medicine cards. So for instance, I literally practice this medicine. So every day I pull I pull a spirit animal card. So this
Okay.
is from Jamie Sams, SAMS. Her medicine card deck, it's connected to the medicine wheel. She actually is a Native American Indian, and I forget how many generations, maybe 9 generations back. Her great, great, great times 9 grandmother was a very famous medicine woman named Twyla Nitch. So you can literally just pull a spirit animal card. And this is how I introduce people to some of this medicine that have never heard of any of this stuff before. And I'll say, well, let's pull a card and let's see, because in Native American medicine, all of the animals symbolically send messages to us, have meaning, and are part of their medicine system. So the lynx is the card I drew this morning, and it symbolizes secrets, but deep cosmic secrets and deep spiritual secrets. So it's a very deep medicine. And what I ask Great Spirit, so I say to people, here's my transparency. I was raised in a Roman Catholic religion, right? But I understand a little bit of a lot of other world spiritual practices. And I see my spirituality as encompassing all the other world religions under it like an umbrella. So each day, something simple you could do, you could literally, I call it angels, allies, God, great spirit, animal spirit guides, Buddha, and my masters, because I'm covering the whole playing field here,
Everything.
people. I am. And I'm asking all of my masters to send me, in this case, Native American medicine, the spirit animal I need today to be my highest and best good.
Interesting.
And so it's just something very simple and easy, and it's not that hard, right? Because for most people, they're saying, this is really interesting, but I don't know that I'm going to read a book about it. Or maybe they want to like take a look at it's funny because Judith, I have to look behind me because it's Anodea Judith. So her last name is Judith, and the book is Eastern Body, Western Mind. That's also not really a self-help book, but there are things that help you to begin to incorporate and understand some of these philosophies, these medicines, the methodologies connected to them. And I say to people, look, if the only takeaway that you have from this conversation tonight is for you to know the importance of your self-care. So choose one thing that may help you get healthier. And you don't have to overwhelm yourself, right? Practice belly breathing. Set a timer on your phone, 5 minutes. Do some belly breathing. Go online and look at any of the free resources for guided imagery. We all have these wonderful apps, right?
Sure.
Calm, breathe. You can
Headspace.
practice Headspace. You can access any of these resources. Like, we are not at a lack of resources. It's more people come to me and say, I'm so overwhelmed by all of the noise. I just need to keep it simple. So I'll say, okay, then let me just first get you in your body, okay? So I teach people how to literally feel the bottom of their feet
That's
on the
excellent.
floor.
Are you familiar with Apollo Neuro?
I don't know if I'm familiar
To
with
turn you on
that.
to that. So,
Oh.
right now when we hear like our phone goes off, we get the
Mhm.
messages, we go right back
Titan,
to that,
right?
right?
Yeah,
What
right.
now? What now? Right? So Apollo Neuro is really cool. A couple of my patients do have it. It's an investment.
Yeah.
Um, but it's the vibrational tone that they would feel. They can wear it down their ankle, they can wear it on their wrist, and it's healing vibrational tone. So it actually is able to like almost recircuit the brain. So you're not going
Very
this way, you're
cool.
going this way. So it's very vagal tone type
Oh,
of thing.
very much.
But yeah, you gotta check that out. I think that's very cool.
I know, right? Like
All
all
right.
these things.
So can you share with people how does somebody get in touch with you? How can they
Yes.
work with you? All that.
Sure. So I am able to work with people physically in my brick or mortar office here in Delaware, but I also, as a nationally board certified health and wellness coach, I have clients all around the country that work with me virtually.
Yes.
Or if they're stopping by Lower Delaware and they want to see me in person, they can in the brick and mortar office. You can head on over to my website at empoweredwellnesscoaching.com. You also can find me. And this is all new for me, right? I'm on TikTok now. And so you can find me on
You
Instagram and
did it.
TikTok. I did.
Okay.
So I say to people, okay, I don't even know
Alright.
the proper vernacular, but I believe it's my Instagram and my TikTok handle is
Nice.
at dr_, and it's empowered, but you had to shorten it. So it's EM. I have to even look at it on paper myself. PWRD Wellness. So
Wonderful.
that's the handle at both places. I'm on Facebook, so you can find me on Facebook under Empowered Wellness by Dr. Carolyn Trasko. I have a couple of private Facebook groups depending on what I'm doing. And I also, I have a membership program for people that are like, look, I'm just interested in learning more about this medicine and learning about it in a way that's digestible, that we actually can practice some different techniques together and learn a little bit of the information. So I give you some left brain stuff,
Nice,
and then
nice.
we do some right brain stuff in my membership. And then obviously I work with people one-on-one as well. And that's the most personalized level of medicine. But, certainly you can, and if you can't, if for some reason you can't find me in any of those ways, then no doubt, we will find ways to get that information out to your audience. I'm sure.
Excellent. So what I'm going to ask you to do is you can kind of put that together for me, because when I do the replay, I'm going to list all those things that you had, including,
Perfect.
can you put up the cards as well? I think that's really cool.
Oh, sure. I'll make a note to make sure that I do that, because they're readily available. I have recommended to so many people to buy the deck and kind of experiment with it. And they're not the only decks. Obviously, there's so many different card decks, but it's one of the first ways I was introduced to this kind of medicine. And I thought, oh, how interesting. And I didn't really even understand it. And now it is part of my own personal medicine every day. So
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much. I think we might have to come back and do a part 2.
Oh, I would love that, because this
So
is so much fun.
it's a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. All right, so hang on. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll put information up on the replay.
Thank you.